Hello, I'm Paul Gates, and welcome to The Academics. I'm joined by my fellow panelists Dave Spiceland and Christine Trexler. Now Appalachian Senior Riley Hutchinson will go over the topics that will be discussed today.
Hello, I'm Riley Hutchison. Today on The Academics, the panel will discuss the current events affecting us globally, nationally, and locally here in the High Country. Today's topics are the fate of the Muslim ban 2.0, Obama's wiretaps, the GOP split on Ryancare, and the spike in racial incidents.
Thank you, Riley. Today on The Academics, we'll first be discussing the fate of the revised Muslim ban, also known as Muslim ban 2.0. How would the travel ban affect students from abroad? Do you have anything on that, Christine? I think you've been looking into the local angle.
Yeah, I have looked into it a little bit, and I do understand that at App State, even though we're not the biggest campus, we do have a good size international student population, and it is very scary for any international student to think, okay, it's a holiday break, I'm going to go home, only to find they can't come back to the university, and that actually indeed did happen over the winter break. So it does and it has affected students here at Appalachian already.
And now, of course, it's in court for the second time. It's been stayed, the second version has been stayed by district courts in both Hawaii and in Maryland. So now we're headed apparently for the Ninth Circuit and the Fourth Circuit. How's that going to go, Dave?
Well, is it really a Muslim ban? It's something to where it's an executive order that the president is enforcing law that Congress has passed. Apparently, President Obama and I think President Clinton had the same kind of a ban on countries that happen to have a majority Muslim population. So is it a Muslim ban in terms of a religious kind of ban, or is it a ban on people who may be here to do harm to us?
Well, didn't Trump say something about banning Muslims during the campaign? He's pretty explicit about that.
There's a lot of things that was said during the campaign, and apparently the federal judge in Hawaii was using that language, which even Dershowitz, a well-known liberal, said that that's something outside of his purview, to take something that was taken in the campaign and to use that in terms of what was said in the executive order.
And then, well, that'll be, see how that, what the basis for a decision, decision is. How about the idea, now of course we're in the middle of Neil Gorsuch's hearings. How is that going to affect if this goes to the Supreme Court? There's some talk about maybe the administration slow walking the case, waiting for Gorsuch to join the bench before rendering a decision, hoping then, of course, for a 5-4 in their favor. But does that seem to be a risky tactic?
Well, of course, politics has nothing to do with the court system.
Well,
facetiousness plugged in there, so.
Of course. But the practical effect, are we seeing, there was talk about how many high-tech startups have been started by people of Arab descent, Steve Jobs, for instance, that in fact most startups are by immigrants and not by native-born Americans. So do we foresee an effect on the tech industry, the ability to be competitive, anything like that?
What do you think?
Well, that's a big question to unpack, but I definitely do believe that there are issues in banning immigration from Muslim majority countries in general, because you're punishing an entire population and turning them away. In the first version of it, the largest hotbed of terrorism is in Saudi Arabia, and that wasn't even on the list. So it did lead to questions of how is this protecting us from any level of terrorism. But we do have a lot of innovators from all sorts of countries, and you are correct, we do have a lot of startups from Muslim majority countries. So I think it would be a negative impact on the tech industry overall. And it also is interesting that most recently, I believe it was the TSA, just banned electronics larger than a cell phone on an airplane from Muslim majority countries. Quite a few of them. It's still developing. There was more revealed. It was 10 specific airports last time I checked. Some people have speculated that it's to limit competition, specifically on airplanes though, from Emirates, Etihad, and Qatar Airways, which have been very large competition for American airlines. So I thought that was really interesting in just terms of stifling competition from those Muslim nations.
That's a little Machiavellian. I hadn't heard that that justification, but you know, it doesn't really seem to have much to do, if anything, to do with the ethnicity or anything like that. It's just the departure point of the airline, and you know, it's not really just a ban on taking it on the airplane. You just can't have it with you in the cabin. You know, still can have it, you know, in the cargo hold in your checked luggage. So that's.
Yeah, what would the security purpose be for that? How would that prevent
Sure.
anything from happening?
That's separate from the from the ban. Probably it's now, you know, back to pure security and concerns about that kind of thing.
Well, you know, is there a constitutional right for anybody to come to this country? And there isn't. I don't know why this has become a cause célèbre, again, when Presidents Obama and before him Clinton had done some of the same kind of executive orders. But yeah, immigration is a very important part of this country. When I talk about the history of radio and television, you got a lot of people who came to this country from other places. And they were I mean, our space program, Saturn V was built by Germans, who, if they had it their way, they would have taken a lot longer to build that thing, but that's another story.
Well, that's true. I mean, this is not the first time we've seen certain groups targeted in immigration. There was the Chinese exclusion in the late 19th century,
Which had a lot to do with building railroads.
Right. Yeah, that's right. Held that up a little bit. Well, slightly related, I guess, is the Japanese internment, but that was during the war. That's a little. But both those things are, you know, in the light of history, been pretty much classified as mistakes. As you say, Dave, you know, we've been dependent on immigration for lots of things.
Oh yeah.
Right from the start. You know, to go back far enough, of course, the first exclusion were Irish, which, you know, would really be completely unthinkable today, I think.
Especially in Boston.
Especially in Boston. Yeah, that's right. That's right. Anything more on where this might go? Where is it going to be upheld? Is it going to be modified again? Is there going to be a 3.0?
I could very well see it developing for months and potentially even years to really get a finalization on it and see what it will look like. Because if they're waiting for Gorsuch to get an appointment, well, he's stated that he's not going to be necessarily controlled by the administration that appointed him. So it will be interesting to see how he does vote on it, if it made it that far.
Well, since we're talking about Supreme Court justices, there's a long history of presidents who have appointed people who were told that they are a rock-hard conservative, liberal. John Sununu told, I think, the first President Bush, I can tell you that, I'm trying to think of the Supreme Court justice, the one who retired, David Souter, that he's a rock-hard conservative. Well, that didn't work out. And Eisenhower, one of the last days that he was in office, said, do you have any regrets? And he said, yeah, I wish I hadn't appointed Earl Warren to the Supreme Court.
And William Brennan.
Yeah.
I tell that story in class all the time. Yes, because
they're independent. That's the point.
They do have a tendency to turn independent once they get the job and say, I'm going to see things the way the law tells me to, not the way the president expects me to. How about the wiretapping? You know, this has been ongoing now since what, March 7th? Are we somewhere around that? President Trump is the only person who maintains that Trump Tower was wiretapped. Even accused, you know, doubled down a couple of times on it, accusing the British of participating in wiretapping of his phones. The intelligence services, no evidence. Senate, House investigative committees, no evidence. where's this going? And why is this keeping itself perpetuated?
Well, two things. One, the term wiretapping is really not accurate, because with cell phones, you don't just open somebody's phone and unscrew it and put a device in there like you might have 10, 20 years ago. So even the term wiretapping is superfluous. There's a lot of things that we would probably be surprised, such as it used to be the Soviet embassy. The Russians insisted that they be on a hill in the Washington area where they were, the microwaves for telephones were right in that path, and they could pick those up and listen to them, and those kinds of things. If something is secret, there's a lot of people who probably, and I hate to go this direction because people say, well, could there be a chance of somebody doing such and such? Well, you don't know unless you have the evidence, which is what we're looking for. But if something is secret, it's probably pretty secure that that's going to be difficult to really understand. And I guess the last thing too is, as we record this today, late yesterday there was something that happened that I've not been able to get my arms around, so to speak, but apparently there's something else going on, that there possibly was some kind of eavesdropping or whatever on the Trump campaign. The fact that Mike Flynn left his office so quickly indicated a leaking of some top secret information, apparently. But it's all very interesting.
It's just such a huge story. It's hard to even unpack everything that goes on, and especially with the Comey hearing, and it's just every day there's something new. But as you were saying, like, maybe it's a very national security type situation and there was wiretapping. But in that instance, is it appropriate for a president to just leak that himself and say, yes, I was wiretapped, I have nothing to actually support it, but I've come across these secret files that indicate it's the truth? I don't believe that that's appropriate to just, in a fit of rage or an early morning tweet session, to leak that kind of information.
Yeah, that is quite a charge to make, of course, and then it raises the question, which came up immediately, was this done? It seems that Trump believes it was done on Obama's orders, when in reality it would have to be, and you were talking about secret, a secret court warrant, FISA.
The FISA warrant, yeah.
Like that would be a different story, but still don't have evidence there either. I think the thing that you maybe referred to that just happened yesterday, Dave, was something about some communications intercepted during the transition. Is that
Apparently so, yeah.
Which is new from yesterday. So there's a lot to keep track of here.
And Washington leaks like a sieve.
Yep, that's true. It certainly does. Okay, another topic, current events. GOP and healthcare. Remember, now, of course, everybody ran on repeal and replace. We haven't really got repeal nailed down yet. Apparently, replace isn't going all that well.
But there's something about the Affordable Care Act, is that there were other things that were put in there, such as the federal loan program. People don't realize that the federal government took over, and I'm not saying it's bad or good, it just happened. It was stuck in the bill. The fact that, and I mentioned this before, calorie counts, that when you drive into, I'll just say local businesses, and you see the calorie counts on the menu, that's because of the Affordable Care Act. That when Nancy Pelosi said, to paraphrase, we have to pass the bill to see what's in the bill, and then Representative John Conyers of Detroit said, I don't have time to read these bills, I let my staff read them, which is really responsible. You've got a lot of things that the regulators have put in the bill. Was it 2,000 pages? Something like that. So when I hear about repeal the bill and even fiddling with the bill, I really would like to find out, what about these other things that were put into the bill, or were they put in terms of the regulation?
Well, I guess repeal means repeal everything. Do we want to take away the calorie counts, or Or is that not helpful to some?
Well, you know, when the government starts telling us what to do, I like to look at calorie counts, but I'd like to see the private sector do more of that. I'd like to see consumers a little more active in some of this and not necessarily letting the government, which knows all in Washington, tell us what's best for our own private lives. But that's just me.
If we leave that one to the private sector, though, what's going to happen? They're going to boost the fat content, need to make it more yummy, more sugar, calories all over the place now.
Those rascally corporate
So
people.
that's, you know, got to keep us buying the product, moving the product.
But what you say something? I don't want to.
How's that?
Yeah.
How is this
Well,
playing,
just in
playing
terms
out
of-
in boom? How's that?
Well, when I think about the calorie counts, I worked at Starbucks when that came out, and I would say for a few weeks, I noticed less people ordering the high sugar drinks. But by the end of it, people don't really, it doesn't have that big of an impact in terms of ordering a 800 calorie latte in the morning. Starbucks had to. It's one of the biggest coffee chains, if not the biggest coffee chain in the world. So they were forced, they didn't have a choice, because I think for local businesses, if you have less than a certain amount of locations, you're not required to have calorie counts. But for like national companies, that is a necessity from that bill for them. But yeah, I can see for like a local business that maybe is regional, so it's a little less local, it would be regional. But that could have an impact on them for having to absorb the cost of creating new menus and creating new posters, everything that has a calorie count on it. And I do understand what you mean for consumers taking more of the initiative to actually demand, hey, we want to see the calorie counts on it, even though you don't really want to know what's in your food.
And I wonder too, as we get older as a country, not that I'm old, but I'm wondering and thinking for myself, I'm a little more wondering what goes into my body as far as food and my health, you know, those kinds of things. So maybe an aging America may be more involved in that.
Yeah, I mean, our tastes mature.
Oh,
We've
yeah.
known that, and you know, you're more aware of things when you're young. You're after what's good and what's
Oh, you're running on
what's cheap.
fumes when you're young.
satisfying.
Yeah.
You just will eat anything, of course.
But could I go back to the process? You talked about the health care bill, whether it's Trump Care, Ryancare, or whatever. But what's happening right now? I remember when we taught in Poland a couple of years ago, I mentioned Bismarck, and he supposedly is the one that said that the only difference between, I hope I get this right, but basically sausage and laws, that
The two things you don't want to see made.
Exactly.
Right.
And in fact, they knew that. They spoke and said, yeah, well, that was Bismarck, you know, in English. It was a great program there. But we're watching the sausage being made, and it's not a pretty process, because the president says, okay, here's what I want, and he asks for a lot of things that he knows he's not going to get. You know, President Reagan, I was reading an interview with him, and he complained about every time he sent a bill to the democratically controlled House and Senate, they said it was dead on arrival, although he still got some of what he was looking for as far as tax cuts. So right now you've got this process going on. The conservatives say this, and the liberals say this, and different, I mean, in every party. Nancy Pelosi learned, and this is not a pejorative attack on her, but she learned that dealing with her own people, as Ryan is learning, is like herding cats, and that they kind of do what they want to do, but that's part of the process.
Well, how about the competing replacement proposals, you know, Ryancare and Trump Care, and how might this play out locally too in Watauga County? You know, in a rural, somewhat older population, less affluent than some parts of the state, as far as full-time residents go. You know, the idea, I think, with the replace is to save money. So where are we going to cut back, and who's that going to affect?
Well, interestingly, for North Carolina, to tie it back to a local angle, we will be the second most affected state by a repeal and replacement of Obamacare, if it was the current replacement. We're second only to Alaska in terms of dependency on it. So the average Obamacare customer could expect their tax credit to be decreased by $5,000. So on a low-income individual, that's a great effect on them, and that would definitely be a negative impact in terms of being able to afford health care. That was the most recent estimate from CNBC for if it was the Trump care or actually Ryancare replacement.
Say, Dave?
2 words, which will never happen. And do you mind if I say you're a lawyer?
Go ahead.
Tort reform. If we had some kind of tort reform, some have said that that's a possible way of cutting back on these lawsuits. I mean, there's a reason for some lawsuits. Republicans don't want that, and the Democrats don't want that. That's their bread and butter as far as, getting money for elections and whatever.
The lawyer lobby is very powerful.
They are very powerful.
That's right.
Yeah. So.
And I think that's a safe bet that it's not going to happen
Yeah.
because we've been talking about it as long as I've been voting, and hadn't happened yet.
Yeah.
That's right. For our last question, let's turn to a spike in racial incidents. I mean, there's been, we've seen, those 2 Indian, South Asian Indian fellows attacked in a bar in Kansas by this unhappy citizen who, says, "Get out of my country." Shoots them both, one dies. And we've seen, incidents of gravestones being pushed over in Jewish cemeteries. So it's not just Middle Easterners apparently, but native-born Jewish Americans. What's this about? Where's this come from? I mean, we've always had anti-Semitism, never's gone away. The Klan has never completely disappeared, but there seems to be a resurgence of that kind of activity.
Well, I actually am from the Philadelphia area, and there has been a huge wave of anti-Semitism. I see relatives just posting pictures of they see swastikas spray painted in areas they've never seen before, especially in predominantly Jewish neighborhoods. And they've seen a spike since the election specifically, but I just think there's been a lot of people who have open anti-Semitism or have made very racial comments, and they have risen to power and seen success. So there's a lot of controversy around Steve Bannon. He's someone who people do view as controversial, and he has been accused of anti-Semitism. People may feel emboldened by seeing a man who represents that in such a high position of power. So that could definitely be a link to increasing racial tensions or increasing racial violence.
Yeah, Steve Bannon's web activities have been, with Breitbart before he joined the campaign, and they've, shown themselves to be fairly white supremacist and that kind of thing.
Well,
so is that tied in?
We've talked about this before, and I grew up in an area where bullying has become a favorite topic for some people. Bullying is wrong. It's antisocial. I was bullied all the time when I was in high school. I was beat up all the time when I was in high school for a lot of different reasons. I didn't hang around in a gang. I kept my mouth shut, but I still got beat up. So if there's anybody who can relate to these kinds of things, I can do that. If we can teach, if we allow parents to teach tolerance, to teach love, things like that, I think that can be helpful. But if we're talking about white supremacy, there's black supremacy, there's different groups that, and I'm talking about to the extreme. And in my opinion, all those things are wrong. I mean, we need to teach true equality and respecting people, respecting true diversity among people.
But have we seen that kind of supremacy in government before?
As far as white supremacy, or?
Well, no, certainly not white supremacy, not like today, but I mean black supremacy.
Well, we saw it in Philadelphia some years ago when you had the Black Panthers, who are still around, who were keeping people from voting and intimidation, so you've got those kinds of incidents.
That's a localized problem.
Well, maybe so, but
well, that's our time for today. Dave?
Well, of course, every week we talk about some of the current events that affect us globally, nationally, locally. So here in the high country, as we deal with some of these, we'll discuss things that are near and dear to our hearts by next week. So we'll talk about some of the leaking from Washington. So you can look forward to that.
Thank you for tuning into The Academics. See you next week.